Hi, I'm Heidi Harriet. Welcome back to Doggone Good Information. And I'd like to welcome my co-host, Tommy Fahey.
Hi, Heidi. How are you?
I'm great. Good to see you, Tommy.
Good to see you.
All right. So any news from the last week or so that you want to share before we jump into our main topic, which is a tough one this week? We're going to talk about breed-specific legislation and all that entails.
I'm looking forward to that discussion.
Yeah.
So I do have a story I think you'll find very interesting. Last week, my niece and nephew were here visiting. And so my mom and I took them to the zoo. So I went and spent the morning at the zoo walking around our local
Are you Dickerson Park Zoo?
Dickerson Park Zoo, yeah.
Gotcha.
And I found it kind of interesting. There was very little interaction, very little. You didn't see any keepers around. You didn't see, they didn't have anything, no live animal interactions like where they bring out, maybe a small animal that kids could pet or handle or see. There were no shows of any kind. It was really just kind of walking around and looking at animals in their habitats.
Probably sleeping a lot in warm weather, right?
Correct. We went first thing early in the morning so that, it wasn't super hot, but it was pretty dry, I would say. The only interaction thing that they had available, they have Feed the Giraffe deck, which is really cool. You go up and you buy, for $5, you get a little handful of lettuce that you can hand feed the giraffes, which was really fun. But that was the really only kind of interactive thing that they had available in the entire zoo. So I'm watching the different groups of people going around the zoo and the kids, watching, and then also listening because there's no professional there explaining anything about the animals. So I'm listening to parents try to explain things to their children. And I found it really interesting because, again, they're kind of spreading a narrative that is maybe not completely accurate in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Even just the kind of the terminology, look at that sleepy, sad, whatever animal. Well, it's not sleepy or sad. It's hot and it's resting under the tree in the shade, So I also was watching then how the kids took in and processed the information and what they liked and what they didn't like. And you see the kids just kind of run up to the exhibit, look for about 10, 15 seconds, and they're like, okay, I'm done. And they move on.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing there interactive, and they're not going to stand there and read a sign. They're not going, they're not interested in, the big display that they've put out. So I found that very interesting. You talk a lot about this on your other podcast, and have a lot of professionals in that do a lot of presentations with animals. Yeah. And I thought we have really lost a connection here. This was an opportunity to get kids really excited about, animals in general, but, conservation of endangered species, that kind of thing. And I don't think we did a very good job of it. I think there was a lot of missed opportunity here at the local level that due to, I think there's some regulations and things in place with the different associations, AZA, American Zoo Association, where they can't, this has to be protected contact, things like that. Yeah. So I think we've kind of lost a little bit there.
Couldn't agree more. And the podcast I'm getting ready to do that will be out by the time this airs is with Sarah Conley of the International Elephant Foundation. And her and I talk a lot about, as I do with other professionals, animal professionals, especially exotics, big animals, that the AZA, Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and then you have Zoological Association of America, which does allow more display, right? AZA has become kind of like pandering. Reminds me of Wrangling with the Elephants. This is, we're listening to our audience. No, you're not. You're listening to people who have the vocal minority. And I really hope people listen to my other podcast, Animal Tales, because I talk a lot about this. Kay Rosaire, who was on the podcast at the beginning, so earlier this year, 2023, she talks about her show at 2:00 that they do at the Big Cat Habitat. People start to flock in about 1:30, and it's always full. It's indoor. It's great. She's got some big cats and some other animals. Monica Weldy, Paradise Ranch, does a lot of talking and interacting with her bears. And it really is interesting. So I appreciate that observation. I think it's a mistake. I think we need to keep, even if the animal's not doing a lot in the background, but a keeper comes out and explains why it's so important for the, as you mentioned, the conservation aspect. They won't read the signs. Yeah.
I was comparing it kind of to an experience I had with you, actually. We went up to Baraboo, Wisconsin, to Circus World. And I remember they had one of the elephants out in front of the big top where you could walk right up and pet. And the handler was, I don't remember the handler's name, but
probably Armando.
Yeah. And she was just right there. There was maybe one little tiny fence or something, but you could walk right up and pet her, and she would reach out and touch the people as they went by. And it was so much more interactive and so much more engaging. And then compared that to the Springfield Zoo where we went, and there's a singular elephant kind of off in the distance, just eating some hay, and there's no interaction. There's nobody around to talk about her, even what her name is.
So interesting. It's a shame.
I think that there just could have been a lot more. I love the term edutainment.
Edutainment, yeah.
Education and entertainment put together. I think so much more could have been provided with that, and the kids would have gotten so much more out of it.
Agreed. So. They're also not allowed to do rides, and TripAdvisor will not promote a business or allow a business on their platform like elephant rides. So they, in their infinite wisdom, have made that decision that's a bad thing.
Yeah,
it brings in amazing conservation dollars, and it enlightens people to want to care about the animals because they've interacted with them.
And how did we decide that was bad?
It's not based on science. I've had scientists on this on my podcast, Animal Tales, and it is not. Again, this is what the public wants, and it's just pandering, and it's going to take animals out of our lives. Ironically, it's doing the opposite.
Yeah.
So, good observation, and like I said, the podcast that will be out that we're taping today is we're going to talk a lot about that. All right, so I came across something as well I've talked about on this podcast and my other podcast. The CDC had suspended the import of dogs from, I believe it was 113 countries through July of 2023. So that would be expiring due to rabies and falsified documentation and sick dogs and falsifying too young of a puppy coming in. They just extended it. They extended the suspension for one more year for 2024. So they still feel like the issue, these are classified as countries high risk for rabies. And again, it's just a small portion of the dogs that come in, and I think it's over 100 countries. So that tells you a lot about how many dogs are coming in to this country. It's just mind-boggling. And we're being told the shelters are full, but yet they're bringing in the adoptable dogs. So
yeah, that's a really odd conundrum there.
It surely is. And the CDC is not happy to be involved in this, but their hand was forced from what I read about it. And the American Kennel Club is also very involved. And some of the dogs that come in would be dogs that are going to breeders. To their credit, the American Kennel Club is there at the table discussing it with them to ensure that they don't take away the rights of people who might want to adopt, some breeding stock from another country, but yet, is trying to play by the rules when a lot of the shelters and rescues aren't, because the demand is so high, they need to get the dogs in. So
yeah,
this is a podcast that I've already done, and check out our prior podcasts about this, because there is a lot more to that story for sure. So check that out. And then the last thing, and then we'll jump into our main topic. Chat GPT. Oh boy. That's a podcast in itself for many reasons. But so I go on there and I chat with it. And I read somewhere, chat with it like you'd chat with a person instead of asking Google question type thing.
Right.
So I've done it on a lot of fronts. And the last one I was doing was about is positive reinforcement training good, and really talking with the bot about that. And boy, does it come back with a narrative that is very dangerous. It tells you that, you basically don't want to use aversives, no negatives. And then I said, wait a minute, what about operant conditioning? And it kind of came back and said, yes, there's such a thing, but it was unbelievable. It really, and I've had this experience with my other conversations about animal training beyond dogs, and that it follows a narrative that's popular right now, and very that's really disappointing to me, and I think very dangerous.
Incomplete information.
Yeah,
that's what we're dealing with.
Incomplete, but yet slanted.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you really are trying to find sources of information, it can be really hard. So it's disturbing to me. I keep kind of training on it. I keep hoping people will just hire me to keep filling it with information, because apparently there are a lot of jobs out there where you're basically training it or giving it information. My concern is the animal rights groups with their multi-million dollars will have people actively doing that, which will perpetuate the narrative.
Of course.
So, against Heidi trying to pay me, I'll go on and talk to it a lot about this. So just something to be mindful of. Take a subject matter about. I'm talking to our listeners, and talk to Chat GPT about it and see what kind of narrative you get on a subject matter you're knowledgeable about. And it'll be interesting to see if you have a similar experience. So little scary, and we need to be mindful of that. It is artificial intelligence.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, I'm Heidi Harriet, and this is Tommy Fahey, and we're providing some doggone good information. At least that is our goal. And we'd love to hear from you as well. Let us know what you think about what we're discussing on the podcast. And we're going to talk now about a really difficult subject, because people are emotional on all sides of this. And it's tough. It's breed-specific bans, breed legislation. And so you'll see breed-specific BSL is a big little acronym, because it's cities and states are grappling with this. So Tommy, I'm going to let you start off our discussion.
Yes. So BSL, breed specific legislation, is the big topic. And there's been a study done, it's about a 20-year study looking at what dogs were most aggressive, what dogs were responsible for the most biting, those kinds of things. And I think, Heidi, you have more of the statistics on that. And so then that has been used in the last 20 years or so. It affects your insurance, homeowners insurance, renters insurance. It affects whether or not you're allowed to have a dog or a certain type of dog in a rental property. And then in certain municipalities. So there, as far as I know, there are no states that specifically outlaw breeds, but certain cities, counties, villages, whatever distinction you want to make, can have these certain laws in effect. And they're mostly targeted at pit bull. And pit bull is this distinction of it's not a technical breed. It is sort of a lay term for Staffordshire Terrier and dogs that look like a Staffordshire Terrier.
It's a tough word.
It's a mouthful. So, these are the dogs that are kind of commonly seen in the dog fighting rings, and they're bred specifically over hundreds of years, have been bred to be relatively aggressive. And you hear things about like the locking jaw, and they bite and rip kind of things. So there's a lot to be said for not having these dogs available. I'm a little concerned, I would say, of being so specific as far as legislation comes, because who then, at an operative level, who actually makes the decision of whether or not that dog is specifically that type of breed?
I think that's a real challenge. I agree with that.
It's a really big problem. So here in Springfield, Missouri, where I live, there is a city ban on American Pit Bull Terriers or American Staffordshire Terriers. And the problem comes with who then is in charge of identifying if that dog is in fact that breed. And I remember actually working for the vet clinic that people would come in with a dog that looked pitty, I would say. And they would specifically ask us when they put in the information in the dog's in their chart, in their medical chart, they would write down a different breed because they didn't want any paperwork showing Staffordshire Terrier or Pit Bull. Because that would cause them issues if their apartment complex wanted to see veterinary records, things like that. So there's lots of sort of loopholes, and there's lots of who decides what is what. And so I just kind of have a hard time wrapping my head around exactly how to legislate this.
Yeah.
But Heidi, I think you've got a lot of statistics on kind of why it's important to look at specific breeds.
Yeah, it's a tough, again, this is difficult. As a dog trainer, I really struggle with this because my father told us it's never the animal's fault. I live on that sword, and I think that's really important. That being said, we as a human population need to understand and care for the people around us, especially children. We are the caretakers of the children. We're in a position now where the shelters are not full of what used to be considered the adoptable animals. So now they're full of bully breeds and bully crosses. And to your point, they're breeding the worst of the breed in many cases. So it's already a challenging breed for some reasons because of its instincts. Many of these breeds, several of these breeds, but now you're breeding the worst of the pack probably because of the rings, fighting rings. So it's really challenging. So the statistic, a resource that I use is called dogsbite.org. A professional woman was attacked by a pit bull many years ago, was looking for stats and information online and couldn't find anything. And she wasn't looking to say, there's got to be a big problem. She just wanted to understand because it was so traumatic for her. She lived through it, obviously. So the first statistic is in 15 years from 2005 to 2019, canines killed 521 Americans. Pit bulls contributed to 66%. And I see that statistic a lot. Between 66 and 75% is the statistic I see generally on this. You've got to breed or a breed is probably a strong word, but American Pit Bull, American Staffordshire Terrier.
The type of dog that's responsible. And I see it. I see it in my work, and I see it in people who really should not be holding these dogs. It's really dangerous for them and everybody around them. You and I are both horse trainers, and we approach it the same way with a horse. My experience, a Mustang will double barrel kick. They're not going to throw a heel and give you a warning. They're going to kick like a zebra. Doesn't mean that I'm going to necessarily outlaw Mustangs, but I'm going in. I'm aware that it's a breed that is going to give me a double barrel kick and cause some damage. That's the challenge with the pit bull. I think when they go, they're going to go for broke, and there's too many horrible stories out there not to consider this, that there needs to be something. It goes on to say combined pit bulls and Rottweilers contributed to 76%. So Rotties are second. And then you've got Dobermans and German Shepherds. Okay. German Shepherds, boy, do they run the gamut, because there's some just amazing German Shepherds out there. But we didn't used to have these dogs as pets in neighborhoods. Maybe if you lived more rural, these Malinois and Cane Corsos, I don't understand the need to have dogs like that. I live in Pinellas County. I think we have close to 1 million people in about 38 square miles, some statistic like that. We're the most dense county outside of New York City in the east. These dogs in these neighborhoods, when you have people who don't believe in a training program or discipline, is where the challenge comes in. We've combined having dogs that require more leadership and a solid training program with a completely emotional climate and regurgitating positive reinforcement training, and don't use aversives. Don't say no, don't tug on the leash or any of that. That combination is deadly. That's my issue with it. And since it's really hard to legislate people to become better leaders and better trainers, I can appreciate that there are communities that feel the need to do this. So 37 states, not statewide, but 37 states within their states have some form of breed-specific legislation. Other states, other municipalities are trying to actually create laws that say we will not allow breed-specific legislation. You'll hear it's the deed, not the breed. Yes.
But
that was, I'm not sure if that passed in the state of Missouri, but that was a bill that they were looking at, I think, in 2020. And I found that through my research, but I couldn't find if it actually passed. I'm assuming it didn't, because Springfield still has the pit bull ban on their books. But where you can legislate according to just general behavior, but not breed-specific bans.
In Springfield?
That's what they're going for when they say outlawing breed-specific bans. But you can still legislate as far as if a specific dog has a continuing issue, or if a specific owner has had multiple dogs with issues.
Okay.
So it's not to say that you can't legislate, dogs at all. It's just, it's pulling the breed specific out of it.
Well, the DOGGONE.org has and I'll put this in show notes, has a piece where they asked the CDC for statistics, right? Mm-hmm. And the CDC used to keep statistics, but they weren't good. There were a lot of bites and a lot of deaths to people and other animals, but they're keeping we're talking more about people at this point. So DOGGSBite.org said we'd like the statistics. Well, the CDC said we're not going to keep statistics anymore on dog bites. Yet they keep statistics on mini blind, the mini blind piece that hangs down and strangles children.
The cord.
There were like 3 deaths and they issued a warning, the CDC. And there's 521 Americans died, from maulings by dogs, and they're saying they don't want to keep statistics. So this organization is pushing back hard, and the AVMA is kind of in the middle of it. They really want to do it's the deed, not the breed.
Right.
As does the AKC, the American Kennel Club. And again, I struggle with it, but I do think the odds are not in their favor. And I think, like a lot of things, which is why I do both podcasts, but why I started Animal Tales, the information is uncomfortable and lies in the middle. It's not really negative. It's not happy. It's gosh, what do we do about this? And
it's the dilemma.
Yeah, I feel like we should. I'd like to see us start by punishing the bejesus out of people who breed for the negative dogs, that aren't breeders and don't have some good reason to want to breed dogs that are, because there's a glut of those dogs, and people who don't spay and neuter, which is more rural areas. They want their dogs to protect their property and that. But I think there should be heavy fines. So here's a story that happened that has provided me, a little bit more direction on how I feel about this. I train horses. I trained a little trick horse for a lady. This was last spring, I believe. Yeah, so it's July of 2023. This would have been early 2022. A little miniature horse, so about 250 pounds, and he does tricks. And the lady is very sweeted. She donates her time to go to little local events, and he does a patriotic little show. His name is Topper. They bought Topper a sidekick named Sprocket, and he was a little pony, so he was probably 450 pounds. He was a stocky little thing. They're in their stall, so they're contained in a stall. And 2 pit bulls came and went after them. It took down the bigger one. Mm-hmm. We're talking 400 and some pounds. I'm thinking of 40-pound children, and they have a strategy the way they do it. I won't get completely into it because it's really disgusting, but they divide and conquer. And these poor little horses were captive. They took their faces off. There were worse parts of this story, believe it or not. So Topper survived, but he is without, you see his teeth, without any flesh around it. And the bones have been damaged, and you'd understand a lot more of this, but it's like it won't regenerate, and he has to suck water to drink it. They have a bubble fountain for him, and he can't pull the water up. It's got to kind of come into him. He eats a mash of soup kind of thing. So they've got now a very handicapped horse for life, no doubt. And so, okay, that can happen. The part of the story that really ticks me off is the woman who owned the pit bulls got him from a rescue, and she was a bleeding heart. She had a little kid, and the kid was always in pictures hugging the pit bull, sleeping with the pit bull. These same pit bulls who created unbelievable carnage. I mean, it's even hard to imagine. The dogs had been out prior. They'd been escaped many times. Animal control had gone over. They'd go get under a fence. She would actually write on Facebook, they went for a run. They went to go run and do their thing. So I stay in touch with the woman who owns the horses. So we showed them all, the animal control, all of this. So now we go to court in it's Lake County, Florida. They live over by DeLand. And the court got stalled twice. I drove 3 hours each way to go to talk about Topper and as a dog trainer. And there were 4 cases before ours, all exactly the same thing. Whether they went after a person or brought down another animal or something. The one lady was there saying, we can't go get our mail because we live in the country and this guy's dog comes charging out at us. He thinks it's funny. Animal control comes over and says the dog's contained. So now they got to get, it's like the onus is upon them to get video, right? Her husband has even been bit. Their dog's been bit. So all of these. And what I found interesting that really made me annoyed with it was the people stand up there, and these are people